Look, Toxic Exposure is a book that depicts the stories of the first 3 litigation trials against Monsanto and their herbicide product Roundup. Roundup has been linked and associated with non-Hodgkin lymphoma, and because of that, there were several lawsuits against Monsanto and this herbicide. The first lawsuit was Lee Johnson against Monsanto, was in 2018. The second lawsuit was Hardeman against Monsanto, and the third trial was Piliades against Monsanto. In these 3 trials, there were many expert witnesses that spoke and testified on behalf of these patients. I was a medical oncology expert witness that testified on behalf of these patients. The book describes the story of these 3 trials. What happened? How did this actually start? What happened in courtrooms, in depositions, the courtroom drama, the legality of certain things, the medical information. What has been actually shown into evidence in these courtrooms that led the jury to award the patients, the plaintiffs, these awards. All of these 3 trials were won by the patients, and Monsanto lost these 3 trials. So the book is about these 3 trials and my role in them. I try to bring light into what happened in these trials. What I saw is science being litigated. That's how I actually saw it, because at the end of the day, in the courtroom, there will be 2 opposing views, as you know. Otherwise, there won't be a lawsuit. There won't be a courtroom. There was one side that was saying, this is what the science is showing. This is the evidence. Let us show you what the science has shown, and let us show you what the company has done to undermine the science or to downplay the scientific evidence. The other side is saying, no, this is not what the science is showing. You misunderstood the science. The way you read the science is incorrect, and we did not undermine or downplay the science. These 2 sides collide in the courtroom, and the jury needs to listen to both sides, listen to the experts, and make up their minds. I obviously had to evaluate the science as well, independently, before I went into the courtroom. I had to read hundreds and thousands of pages of medical records to understand the stories of these patients that were suing Monsanto. And I had to put all of this in context as I was explaining to the jury what my opinion was in all of these 3 trials. My respect will always remain, although I may disagree with their conclusions and with their opinion. I think these are 2 separate things. It is not unusual for 2 colleagues to see the science from different angles, from different lenses. You could look at a clinical trial and you could interpret it differently than your colleague. You still respect each other's opinion, although you don't agree with it. I certainly don't agree with my colleagues who testified on behalf of Monsanto and suggested that Roundup has no link to non-Hodgkin lymphoma whatsoever. I respect them. I value their other scientific accomplishments and what they have done to science, although we clearly don't see eye to eye on this particular part of the science. I don't know if everything will ever come to a close 100%. I don't know that. What I can tell you that Monsanto and their parent company Bayer have settled the majority of the cases against them with Roundup and lymphoma. There have been some cases that were not settled, either because Monsanto did not settle them or because the patients did not want to settle and they still wanted to go to court and have their day in court. So these are continuing to be in the court system, and I don't know whether they are going to completely disappear. As you know, we all know that asbestos, for example, is a bad thing. and it's associated with certain cancers, but you still see law firms asking for asbestos exposure and trying to defend patients. So I'm not really sure whether there will be 100% closure. I would say that I expect fewer and fewer cases to actually go to court with time. And there's a possibility that there will be settlement for everything. I mean, look, science evolves. Science evolves. There was a time when we all thought tobacco does not cause cancer. There was a time when it was acceptable for everyone to smoke in the hospital on medical rounds. There was a time when you could be watching a talk show on TV and the host and the guest were smoking. Today, there's not a single person that does not acknowledge that tobacco is associated with cancer. Now, you can still smoke, it's your choice, but you know there are risks, and that's all what we're asking. What we're asking for is give people the information and let them make an informed decision. And that's what I believe is people were deprived of that choice because they were not aware of the risks. And I think one of the smaller wins that we've had is that Roundup will no longer be available for residential use in 2023. It's still there on the shelves, but we were told that Bayer will pull that from the shelves for residential use, but farmers and others could still be using it. And they will replace that, the glyphosate, which is the ingredient of Roundup, with something else. We just don't know what that will be. We still don't have the information. But these are smaller wins that we actually need to take and hopefully lead to bigger wins. So that's a long-winded answer to your question. Are we ever going to live in a world where there will be zero lawsuits? I don't see that in the near future, but I see those to happen less and less with time.